I think that everyone should have to work in a hospitality environment. Actually, it comes under the work experience piece that they should have to go in or set up a little cafe or something where they are
Yeah.
serving the general public and being taught, I suppose, how to do that, and to a degree. But I think that's something that is really, really important because I think it is a skill that is missing, and you can certainly see it. You know which customers have not been in that situation.
Welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast with me, Louisa Meehan. We're exploring real stories from the trenches of people management. Each episode explores the situations business leaders have actually faced, the wins that surprised them, the failures that taught them, the funny moments that kept them sane, and the challenging times that tested their resolve. We dig into what worked, what spectacularly didn't work, and the lessons learned along the way. This is about the messy, unpredictable, rewarding reality of managing humans, not the sanitized version you read about in business books. So I'm delighted to welcome a very good friend of mine, Becci Harrison, or Becci as we all call her. Becci is an experienced retailer and entrepreneur running a boutique department store and wellness hub in County Wicklow, alongside a small marketing consultancy, RBM Digital. She's passionate about championing small businesses, women in businesses, family businesses, and networking. Becci is a master's graduate of Trinity College Business School, is currently a director of Ireland's Network for Dynamic and Professional Women, trading as Network Ireland, CLG, and formerly held the role of national president for the same organisation. She is a member of the National Executive Council of the Small Firms Association, part of IBEC, and of the Steering Committee of SkillNet Ireland and the Small Firms Association Mentors Work Programme, to get it all out there. She formerly was a member of the government's Retail Consultation Forum and their Digital Economy and Retail Training Working Groups and the County Wicklow Economic Think Tank.
It's a really difficult one to say.
That's a really difficult one, Becci. She's a frequent contributor both on TV and radio, including this morning when she was on Ireland AM. So on East Coast FM, Dublin City FM, Dublin South FM, where she shares her experience through her role as a mentor. She is very interested in the outdoors. Her amazing daughter is a scuba diver instructor, I hear, and enjoys sort of watching her daughter play sports. So when she's not doing all of that, she's talking to me, and I'm delighted to have you come along, Becci.
Thank you so much, Louise. Sorry, it's a tangle twister for you there, or tongue twister.
It's certainly, but that's okay. That's okay. That's why I don't read scripts. I have conversations. So listen, I've known you for a long time now, and throughout that journey, you have ran your shop, which is a fantastic boutique, and a shout out to anybody who is keen on women's apparel, men's apparel, giftware. Definitely call in and see it in Newtown and Kennedy. And for most of that time, until quite recently, that shop also contained a cafe that you ran. You don't run it at the minute. So I wanted to really talk with you about your experience as the managing director of a company and working with the Small Firms Association, etc., as you do, in terms of the challenges within a sector like yours, where you have employees who, by anyone's standards, are not particularly highly paid, comparative to other industries, but yet you maintain a really positive culture. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit to that, and then we'll explore it in more detail?
Absolutely. Look, hospitality and retail are both sectors that employ a lot of people at the lower end of the pay scale, because it's waitressing, it is a sales assistant role. In our businesses, we paid above minimum wage. We don't pay minimum wage, but it is only a step above. It's not vastly above, and we certainly try and give a package that will allow our employees to to be able to live and to afford all that they need to afford. A lot of our staff are work part-time by their choice rather than ours, and we try to facilitate other commitments that they have. And I suppose that is a little bit of the start as to maybe what you're talking about, because we don't have huge pay packages. We don't have a bonus structure that gives thousands every year like some big corporate jobs would give, or tech jobs or whatever else. It's just not, it doesn't work like that in our industry, and we don't have the funds to do that either. I think in working in a small independent business as ours are, it's even more difficult if even within the retail and hospitality sectors, where you're competing against people who are looking to work in bigger retailers, like the multinationals, the high street stores, Irish and international. So some of them may have a bigger capacity for packages that might be more attractive. But for us, it's about flexibility, offering that flexibility to our staff where possible. It's not always possible. So I run a shop and formerly a cafe. You can't let people work from home if their job is to serve a customer. So we can do that. But then with other roles within the business, they can be hybrid or working from home. So to be able to offer that, I think a lot of it, it's about flexibility and accommodation more so maybe than flexibility. So we would have several members of staff who have other jobs or other roles that they fulfill. So we've one of our staff members works voluntarily in the National Gallery. So it's a volunteer role, but that's really important to her. So she's not available to work for us on a Tuesday because that's something that she's very passionate about and is committed to. So we would have other people do that, so that we accommodate that. So we're not saying, well, actually it suits us that you work on a Tuesday, you can't do your other role. Tough. We're saying absolutely, let's work around that and work with you. Some of our other members, team members, have other jobs or other things they do. So again, we try and work together with our teams to make it work for them. We also look at our shift patterns, so how long people are working for. So in most businesses, particularly of our type, there are different slots, and we have busier times and shorter times. So we have quite a few members of staff now who would prefer to work a shorter day. So again, we've facilitated that. So we offer 2 short days kind of that dovetail into each other. You don't have to do the full day, so 2 people can kind of share the role. So that works very, very well also. We also try and look after our teams in other ways. So again, there is only so much from a pure monetary side that we can do. Again, we try to do that as fairly and as fairly as possible across the board. But we look at things like, we have obviously in the boutique or in the shop side, we have a clothes allowance. So the teams can buy clothes at either they get a certain amount for free or as part of their package, if you like, and then beyond that they get a significant discount on any other purchases that they want to make. So that's a nice benefit that they can have. It benefits us too, because we're delighted to have our team wearing the clothes that they're trying to sell. So everyone wins in that case. And then it's really just working together, I suppose, and having an environment where we don't always succeed, but we try to listen to each other, learn from each other, and we take on board the feedback from our teams, because they're the ones on the ground. They're dealing with the customers face to face all day, every day. I do regularly, but not as much as they do. So it's really important that we have their understanding and feedback. And I think people, they appreciate and like to see when their initiatives, are taken on board and are implemented. We are incredibly lucky that our team are incredibly loyal. They've been with us a long time. So while we're not necessarily paying the big bucks, we are hopefully fostering an environment that is nice for them to work in and that they get on. And we really do try and foster that. With any group of people, at times there are clashes and whatever else, but we try and address those quickly and make sure that the environment is a positive one for as much as possible.
Well, I can certainly say, having met most of your team over the years, a lot of them stay for for a very long time, and the majority do. So retention isn't a massive issue, and that's a good sign that they're, broadly speaking, happy and content in the workplace, and they certainly do enjoy wearing the clothes, which is very notable when you go in. So it's something that's definitely something that one would notice. I think it's really important, though. You talk there quite a bit about the sort of the hidden benefits. So that's really about the psychological contract between the organization and the employee, and the importance that that has, and the sort of unique selling point for an organization when they are, the word you used was accommodating towards the needs of an employee. But that's a skill that takes time and practice to sort of be comfortable with doing that. So was there a period where maybe, or a situation where you find that maybe you were a little bit less capable of being accommodating or less willing? And how did that result in the impact on the staff member? And obviously this is many years ago, but just to give a bit of context in terms of when that doesn't go well.
Yeah, well, I suppose first of all, to come back before I answer that question, because I'll have to think about that for a minute, but is to say that in a smaller business, it's much easier to be naturally accommodating and working much more closely with every individual. In a bigger organisation, it's much more difficult to do that. So by nature of our size, so currently we employ, I think, about 18 people. When I ran the cafe as well, we had about 40. I had about 40 team members on site between the two businesses. There is still a cafe on site, by the way, just someone else is running it now. So it is much easier when it's smaller numbers that you can do that. Also, when you have a team. So again, it was by the teams, on the team's direction, if you like, that we have a lot of part-time people and shorter time working people. But that the nature of that allows me to have a slightly bigger team that can be a little bit more flexible and cover and things like that. So it's nice, if you like, you can be more accommodating when you have the resources to allow you to do that in terms of just the physical manpower or woman power, as it mostly is here. But so if you like, a lot of that has happened naturally. Just due to the size and the sort of independent nature of the organisation. It isn't always possible to be accommodating. And, if we roster at the moment maybe 3 or 4 people, 3 salespeople on the floor, on the shop floor at any one time. And if all 3 of them want to take holidays at the same time, that's not really possible. So I suppose we've tried to build structures in place to allow for things like that, so that, on any day, one person is automatically allowed to apply for annual leave. And if more than one needs to do it, it is then on the basis of if we can find a replacement or not. So that can sometimes be, look, we can't accommodate that. We do still try to, and even if it's all 3 want a holiday at the same time, we will try and accommodate that. So very rarely does that actually become an issue, but it's an area that could become an issue, if you like. But by having policies and structures in place around that, it helps cut it off at the pass, if you like. So, there's an understanding there, or there's a somewhat of an understanding there that, this is why. Likewise, coming up to Christmas, it's our busiest time of the year. And we don't, we ask our team members not to take holidays in December. They can take them in January, they can take them in any other of the 11 other months. They can take their holidays, but we ask them not to take them in December, and particularly not the last 2 weeks in December, kind of in the run up to Christmas. So things like that is around that kind of policy piece. To give an example of where it didn't go well, and we had to deal with it. I'm trying to think of something specific with that. I actually, there's nothing that's coming to the top of my mind other than those slightly difficult conversations about, look, really, we need to have you here. Leave that with me. I might come back to it, Louisa. I'll see if I can think of anything else specific where that accommodation piece wasn't able. I actually have one. So, and we got a resolution eventually. So, our business is open 7 days. You mentioned that at the start, and so. Particular days of the week, may or may not suit other people. So for people who want to work mostly midweek and not at the weekends. Then we have other people that prefer to only work at the weekends because they have, they can be released from some of their day-to-day duties at the weekend. So there was one where a more senior person, so we need to have a senior person on duty every day of the 7. So
Yeah.
part of the role is that you have to work at least 1 or 2 days in the weekend, not every weekend, but from time to time. So again, we try to balance it. So the general rule is that you work every second weekend, whether if you're on the sales team or on the management team, and so that's fine. And then we had, again, kind of just that balancing. So we had people that were only available to work on a Saturday or only available to work on a Sunday, and then really that didn't work. So again, I suppose it was a conversation was how we dealt with it. So it was sort of looking at, okay, look, we really need to have the cover, these, and particularly at the weekend cover, Saturday and Sunday would traditionally have been our busiest days of the year. So you need to have the proper cover there on those days, and the proper seniority on site, on those days as well. So we looked at a solution where we said, okay, look, I need you to keep doing what you're doing. We could reduce it. Then we managed to tweak it and reduce it so that there was 1 day of a weekend every second week. So it was, again, so it's only 1 day in a month, which I felt was or 2 days in a month rather than 4 days in a month, sorry, which again is kind of fair. It's not over encumbering. And then looked at, okay, well, look, are there any other solutions? Can we look at maybe elevating other people to take on a bit more responsibility on those days? Is there a slight more remote option available here in terms of being on call rather than necessarily on site, and things like that? So a lot of it is about, I suppose, conversations and coming up with different ways of doing things and looking at it from a different perspective. I don't know, that's not as nitty gritty as maybe you wanted, but that's
no, it's really helpful because it's about trying to be solution driven, and the importance of what I preach the whole time, the importance of conversation. So things come up, people disagree, there's different viewpoints, there's conflict, there's all of those things, and the only way that you can resolve them is through having conversation. Doesn't mean that every conversation will resolve them, but it is the only way to resolve them. So I think it's really valid. A couple of things that stood out to me, but one in particular, it's great for me as a HR person. I'm always advocating the importance of having your policies, your procedures, your rules, your boundaries in place before you need them, rather than trying to come up with them in the heat of the moment. There's always things that you can't plan for. A query will come up that you didn't consider, or will come up in a way that you hadn't considered. But the more that you can take those things into account, the easier it is. So it's interesting to me that was one of the things that you highlighted helped you in addressing issues and sort of allowing for accommodations.
It wasn't preempted, Louisa, by you.
No, not at all. Yeah. But I always say it's like, I don't know what your mum was like, but I know for us growing up, and I try to do the same with my children, my mum, well, and my dad, but my mum really was very clear on, here's the rules, here's the box. And as we grew, the box got bigger, but here's the box. Like, you can go this far, you can stay up this late, you can say this thing, whatever the box was. We were very clear where the lines were. Those lines didn't blur. She didn't bend. But inside the lines, we had complete freedom. If we went outside the lines, it was a problem. It's the same kind of thing from a workplace perspective. That's like your toolbox, your policies give you the lines.
And I actually think, while I completely agree with you, and it's really important to have those lines, I would say that, again, that's a big difference between smaller and bigger companies, or where I think bigger companies, there is very clear lines, there is very clear, everything in it, and the lines cannot be blurred and won't be blurred. Whereas I think in a smaller business, they need to be able to be blurred a little bit more, and also that you take into account those individualities, if you like, of the people that you're dealing with, because we are all individuals and like to be acknowledged as such, and our own peculiarities or a particular set of circumstances need to be accommodated. So I think that's where, we talked again about accommodation, whereas in a bigger organization, it has to be more black and white because you're dealing with so many people, and I
Yeah.
understand that. But it means that very often you will get a hard no, whereas in another situation, that doesn't necessarily actually mean that that's the right answer, although that's what it says in the box, if you know what I mean. So I think that's something as well, kind of going small versus big. There's a little difference with that.
Look, I would completely 100% agree with you. And what I say to CEOs and leaders is, when you know what the rules are, or even when it comes to reward, whatever it is, if you know what that sort of what those boundaries are, you can step outside them. But then you're making a conscious decision to do it, and it gives you the opportunity to challenge yourself. Am I making this decision for the right reasons,
Yes.
rather than meandering through the situation and ending up in a scenario where you've given different things to different people and you don't know how to pull it back.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think
No, and
I completely
I mean,
concur.
that's an interesting point as well, because I think that, like that, like many of us, we would do have the rule book, but actually it's reiterating it can sometimes be a challenge as well, and reminding everyone that while we're very flexible and accommodating, also, just so you remember, this is how it should be done.
100%. Look, none of us like the rules. I don't want to follow the rules. Even coming from
No, you're
HR,
right.
I'm quite happy to make them, but I don't want to follow them. I do follow them. I do, but I get it.
Yeah.
You also, and I think this is a real struggle, whether you're in the retail sector, the hospitality sector, or actually in any business, even in large companies, I've seen this happen. You talked a little bit about cover, and you talked about it very nicely in terms of making sure that the staff can cover the staff. But I know from knowing you and from knowing leaders that there have been many, many occasions where you have had to step in and provide cover because somebody hasn't been there. Because if you have three people and one person's off, or heaven forbid, two people are off, then as the owner, as the leader, you have to step in to fill the gap. So how do you try and mitigate that a little bit or protect yourself in those situations?
Um, yeah, look, that has absolutely happened, and it usually happens when I'm at my absolute lowest point and completely burnt out, and then you have to go, okay, here we go again. and
Yeah.
and I suppose again the difference is with that, if that's meeting and greeting people, that's one thing. If it's getting stuck into the kitchen and prepping food, it's a different thing. So look, that is the role of a business owner. We are the ultimate problem solvers, and that is our role. And so if that involves solving the problem by you stepping into the breach, that's what has to happen. So that it just comes with the territory, and I suppose as business owners we suck that up, if you like. But it's tough, and absolutely contributes to burnout and
Yeah.
exhaustion and all of those other things. I suppose, yeah, I mean, I've spoken about it already there, but trying to have as much cover as possible, and having that contingency in place. That's available to a point. We have in the retail side, we have a couple of our team that have chosen to operate on a sort of ad hoc basis. So they don't want the consistency of a rostered set number of days a week. It suits their lifestyle not to have that, but they are quite happy to be called on an ad hoc basis to come in and cover at short notice. And if they're free, they're free. If they're not, they're not. And that's
Yeah.
very much the basis. It's that, again, that is something that they have requested. It's more difficult to ask someone to do that, but it's very clear that this is something there. And if they can't do it, they can't do it. So there's no
Yeah.
pressure put on them. And most times that's enough, and that helps the situation, and we can call on someone with very short notice, or obviously slightly longer notice if we can. The problems and where I end up stepping in is usually if someone is sick at the last minute and we haven't had an understanding. We also try and have, so again in the shop, looking at the shift patterns and where we are. So we've three people that are rostered on any one day, but actually probably there is only two on the floor at any one time, because the third person is covering breaks and lunches and that type of thing. So it means that there is actually, we actually only need 2 people on the floor. And so again, that could be something where I or one of the managers can step in to just cover the breaks and the lunches rather than needing to
Yes.
cover. So we can cope with one person less. In the hospitality side, again, on the floor and waitressing, we can cover. The team can step up and just do a little bit more to a point. Obviously, if everyone is sick, you can't do that. But in the kitchen is where it ended up being a little bit more of a crunch. And so we tried to have 2 chefs on any one day, so that if one wasn't available because they were sick or on holidays, that there was someone else there. And even if that meant we had to maybe run a slightly reduced menu, that you could do with just one chef. The problem then is when, if you have 2 chefs, if one's on holidays and the other one is sick, then you end up stepping in or whatever. So that's, I suppose, it's trying to be smart with the roster and how you look at people. There's an example, and I don't want to misquote it, but with one of our Ireland's transport groups, we'll leave it at that, the operators.
And we'll be trying to figure this out now. Go on.
But I was very friendly with someone who worked with them as a driver, and they, again, to allow for that contingency for them, in case someone doesn't turn up, someone is sick, someone was whatever else. They had, I think it was something like 5 drivers basically on call. So they'd go into work in the morning. They weren't rostered on any routes with any vehicles, but would be there waiting in case they needed to fill in. Now, I felt that 5 seems excessive for a day to be sitting there on twiddling your thumbs waiting for something to happen that might never happen. So it's not the most efficient and cost-effective way of doing things, but it illustrates the point of the need for the contingency, because stuff does happen, and things come in. And again, they have the resources and the thing to do that. We don't have that, but you can do it a little bit. And I think trying to if you like, box clever a little bit with it, and setting it out and having that little bit of leeway is useful when you can.
Yeah. I mean, I actually, I don't know who you're talking about, but what jumped into my mind, and I'm not asking, was the likes of Dublin Bus or something along those lines. And I could actually see how that would be a reasonable expense to have in a big team, because it wouldn't surprise me if Dublin Bus had 4 or 5 people call in sick, or, on an average day, or certainly 3 or 4 people, because there's so many people going to work and they have to run the service. Now, I don't know if that's who you were talking about, and we won't name names here, but to say that it actually seems like a very sensible approach where you have the resources to do it.
Absolutely needed at times, and that's the thing. So I completely get why it was there, but yeah, no, it's just an interesting way of doing it.
Well, for any employee out there who's listening, or any a leader who can influence an employee, as a HR person, one thing I always try and get across to staff, and you've sort of inadvertently touched on this, is if you know you're going to be sick, or if you are sick and you're like, you know what, there's no way I'm going to be well for 3 or 4 days or 5 days, please, 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 just say it up front. Say it the night before. I'm not well tonight. I might try and come in, but it really doesn't look likely, because then you can put those contingency plans into action easier. And if you happen to end up being overstaffed occasionally because somebody miraculously recovers, most leaders will be more at ease with that versus not having the cover in the first place. You can always go do some cleaning or tidying or whatever.
No, very much so. And even, I mean, in that is the case. And if you have an extra person, that's fine. But even to be able to have a phone call to someone to say, look, could you be on call? I think that so-and-so is not going to be better by Wednesday, and I'll need someone to cover. If you were available, that would be brilliant. So just to have exactly as much notice as possible.
Yeah, because we all get sick, don't we? I mean, everybody has a bad day, and that's, that's okay. It's not okay if you have a bad day every week, but it's okay if you have a bad day. No employer expects people to come to work every day that they're rostered in. But the notice is, in my experience, what drives leaders slightly crazy when it comes to attendance. It's that sort of last minute panic. I was going to steer because I know you've done quite a lot of work across the retail sector at a national level, including some of the work you've done with the Small Firms Association. So I wanted to just touch on something that's come up in recent times in the media around individuals working in the retail sector. And what's come up is that there has been an increase of abuse faced by staff within the retail sector from the general public. Now, knowing your boutique department store, I'm not sure that your staff face a huge amount of abuse. Maybe they do, and I'd be delighted to hear it. But I'm very interested to hear what you know about it within the sector in general as well.
Yeah, no, we're very lucky where we are. We do get irate customers from time to time in the shop, um, and unreasonably so. Sometimes it's reasonable, sometimes it's not reasonable, and so you do have to deal with that. And so I suppose before I get on to the specific other question, I would always have advocated that actually in as much in other countries that people have conscription to the army, I think that internationally there should be conscription for at least a couple of months to either the hospitality or retail sector, because it's really important that everyone knows what it's like to be on the other side. Um,
I worked as a waitress for 3 months in the States. You never forget.
you don't, and I actually think it's really good, because actually sometimes you do come across people that are just not nice,
Yeah.
for no reason, and have no understanding. And it's not that the job is particularly difficult, but it's about interacting with other human beings, and sometimes the role is looked down on, if you like, and that can be not very nice. And that's not what you're asking, but that does happen. And I just thought I'd get in there. Conscription to
Yeah.
hospitality or retail,
You get
essential
my
for
vote.
everyone. In terms of the general thing and sort of abuse and whatever else, again, yes, it is a huge problem. Again, working, just chatting, being involved with the Small Firms Association, Retail Excellence, and listening to other people in the sector who have all, I know, contributed hugely on this topic, particularly city-based businesses, and particularly in the kind of convenience end of things. So that end more so than maybe the kind of fashion side that I would be in, but absolutely awful
Yeah.
abuse, threatening, looking, people coming in trying to steal things or steal money, and if you try and stop that, you've got confrontation, which is horrendous. That's why you will see now walking around Dublin, for example, particularly once you hit the evening time, most of the shops that are open in the evening will have some sort of security guard now on the gate, which again is a huge additional cost on a business to provide. But yeah, it's. I think I'm hearing lots from the sector about really horrendous abuse of towards the people who are coming in, and it's sort of it's targeted and aggressive, and sometimes it's to try and steal something, to try and get one over. Sometimes it's just nasty talk, if you like, and
Yeah.
the lads coming in and making trying to tease or slag or whatever else, which okay may not be as threatening physically, but is certainly threatening in emotionally and whatever else. So yes, it is a big problem. I think it is in particular locations and at particular times of the day in more locations, if that makes sense. So it's not
Yes.
across like that, and it is happening everywhere. It isn't just in cities. It is in other places, in towns as well, where places are open late, and it's that kind of brutish behaviour that can happen, I think, particularly with drink on board or drugs on board, even
Yeah.
more worryingly. And it is, and there's an element then that they're trying to steal money to pay for drugs, but it's not just that. It's also just this kind of bravado, this, yeah, not nice. And again, it's that perceived power play a little coming into it a little bit as well, and it's not nice. And I think it's really affecting an awful lot of businesses in terms of financially obviously needing to protect themselves, but also in terms of loss of revenue from stolen goods, from raids on money, and that type of thing as well.
Yeah, I mean it's very difficult, and it's very challenging when you have to provide support to your staff in terms of a physical, verbal, or emotional attack that's happened. So providing those supports, it's not something that anybody goes into business unless you're an EAP counsellor or something like that. But it's not something that you go into a retail sector or running a restaurant, whatever it is, to have to then deal with somebody coming in and stealing or putting your staff's life in risk, threatening them. And having worked with one of those convenience stores in Parnell Street, I know from talking with the owner in there, he said that he's very clear. If somebody's coming in and they're trying to steal and they're being aggressive, he just gives them the money.
Yeah.
He just, which that is a cost in and of itself, and then that's bound to impact on issues around insurance, or do we bother claiming or not, because how's that going to impact on premiums? So it has all of these knock-on impacts. It also impacts on the guards, etc. So really interesting, and thank you for talking about that.
No, that's all right. And it's also, Louisa, just to say, and I know we're tight on time, but the looking after the teams takes up a huge amount of a business owner's time anyway, whether they have a HR professional working with them or externally coming into them or not. So to add that whole other section, which will take up the same amount of time again if it's in that very intensive situation, it's huge in terms of impact on everyone.
Yeah, and look, I know people who have been in those situations as an employee where something has happened, a form of regression, and following maybe the first one they might get over, but if it happens a second time, which in a lot of these situations it will happen multiple times, a lot of those individuals will actually leave the workplace completely because they can't. It's too difficult, and it's too impactful on them as a person, as a human, as opposed to just, it's not worth it. It doesn't matter how much money they're paid. It's irrelevant. And I've seen it with people paid higher sums and lower sums. It's not about the money. It's about the impact it has on them. It can be massive. So I think it's a really important piece to talk about. So to conclude, as you know, I have borrowed a tradition from a different business podcast that will remain unnamed in relation to asking each guest to leave a question for the next guest without telling the next guest who has left the question for them. So the question for you is, I was going to read your question out there, but no, the question that was left for you instead of by you is, what is the one thing that you wish everybody was taught in school?
Well, I've kind of answered that already. I think that everyone should have to attend work in a hospitality environment. So I suppose in school, actually it comes under the work experience piece, that they should have to go in or set up a little cafe or something where they are serving the general public and being taught, I suppose, how to do that, and to a degree. But I think that's something that is really, really important, because I think it is a skill that is missing, and you can certainly see it. Which customers have not been in that situation, and I think that's the
Well, certainly for any parents out there like me with a child heading into TY next year, it's certainly something to consider in terms of the work experience that they get. Becci, that was an absolute delight, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much for coming along today, and I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely thrilled to be with you, Louisa. Thank you so much. I'm sure there was hours more we could have talked about, but that's lovely.
And we will. We will talk again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.